Good evening and welcome to the National Gallery of Modern Art, Bengaluru, Ministry of Culture, Government of India. Is delighted to have you with us for today's talk, the studios of Raja Ravi Varma. This session invites us to look beyond the celebrated paintings of Raja Ravi Varma and step into the spaces where his idea took shape, the studios that nurtured his artistic vision, experimentation, and influences of modern Indian art. By focusing on process, practice, and context, today's talk opens up a deeper understanding of how artistic legacies are built and sustained. It is our privilege to introduce our speaker for this evening, Ganesh V Shivaswamy. Based in Bengaluru, he is a lawyer and an adjunct professor at the National Institute of Advanced Studies. Over the years, he has made significant contribution to the study and preservation of Raja Ravi Varma's legacy. Through the Ganesh V Shivaswamy Foundation and in collaboration with Google Arts and Culture, he has helped create one of the most intensive digital archives of the artist's work available to the public. Mr. Ganesh V Shivaswamy also serves as the honorary curator at the Sri Chitra Art Gallery and at the museum dedicated to Raja Ravi Varma Press at Hasta Shilpa Heritage Village. As the author of the multi-volume series Raja Ravi Varma, An Everlasting Imprint, he brings a rare combination of scholarly depth and practical insight into the artist's life and work. With his interdisciplinary background as an advocate, author, professor, and curator, Mr. Shivaswamy offers us a unique perspective into the world of Raja Ravi Varma. We are honored to have him with us today and look forward for an enriching and thought-provoking session. Please join me in welcoming him.
Thank you, Darshan, for that introduction. And I want to begin by expressing gratitude to the National Gallery of Modern Art, Ministry of Culture, Government of India, the director, Priyanka Mary Francis, the curators, Subarna Patro, Darshan Amrita, the team at NGMA. And I want to acknowledge the presence of Uma Mahadevan, the Additional Chief Secretary, also a very dear friend. And to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, very good evening. I'm going to jump straight in. And I want to start by asking the question, what is a studio? The concept of a studio is, I think, something which we should look at, one from the perspective of where the work of art is created. Then we look at the multiple dimensions as the talk proceeds. Clearly, the studios where the work of art is created, be it a sculpture, a painting, or whatever it is, and therefore is integral to the creation of the work of art and consequently to the artistic legacy. But something as integral as the studio, for some strange reason, is shrouded in secrecy. There are multiple reasons why this could be. One, of course, most artists do not want people to know how the work of art is created. So the process is kept secret. No one wants somebody else copying what they have done. Another reason why the studio becomes a space of secrecy is because it's the place where ideation takes place. It's a very it's a very intimate intellectual space. So today they will do something and then tomorrow the artist changes his mind. He doesn't want people to come back to him all the time and then tell him, you know, you did this yesterday, but why did you change it today? So the place is kept quiet. And for these reasons, something which is so important to the artistic legacy gets lost to history. And later on, as time goes on and the artistic legacy goes into the public space, the one thing which we are not very clued in on is actually where it happened, which is the studio. So this is challenge number one. Challenge number two is Ravi Varma. Ravi Varma has been one of the most difficult artists to understand. From the point of view of the studio, Ravi Varma really never, he never had a studio only in a single place. He had multiple studios as he traveled across the country. He was really the bee in the bonnet. Every place he would go to, something would happen. There would be little fragments of what happened there. and how the image came to be created. So to bring studios and Ravi Varma together poses a huge challenge. In the course of me writing the books, this was one of the most difficult things to look into. So today's talk is going to look at and offer glimpses of how India's celebrated artist actually his studio functioned. And I want to start with, I think we have to change that. Oh, hurrah. Okay. So where does one actually begin with Ravi Varma's studio? It's actually quite difficult to start somewhere. So I decided to start here. And this is a map. This, as you can see, is the map of the GIP railway, the Great Indian Peninsula Railway. And I think this is the best place to start Ravi Varma Studios exploration. Why? Simply because he was traveling everywhere on this railway. And for those of you all who collect the chromolithographs from the Ravi Varma press, many a time you will see Ravi Varma press GIP. This is the GIP. So what was integral to the studio was also integral to the Ravi Varma press, because a lot of his prints moved far and wide because of this. And so India's map through the railway system is where I wish to begin. But the railway station itself was a place where Ravi Varma would create works of art. Let's look at this. So this is a sketch on the left, and what you can see is a coolie negotiating his fare. You have all of the, this probably was at a railway station itself. And what I find absolutely, Ravi Varma's sketches, they're very interesting, because I think there's a lot of conversation which you can find in Ravi Varma's sketches. As you can see there, he's probably saying 2 annas, and the ladies, I don't think, very happy with that. So she is sort of very angry with the suggestion. But what I really like about it is that the two guys are doing absolutely nothing. They're just standing there and watching the fun. So for those of you who ask me, was Ravi Varma about female empowerment? There you go. You have one thing where the woman is actually negotiating a fare. The picture on the right is another very interesting picture. You will find that in the Sri Chitra Art Gallery. This is by C. Raja Varma. It's a small landscape, and it's actually titled The Giant Tree. But to me, what was interesting is, if you can look in the background there, you can see that little train chugging along. Can you see that? So the train environment, the railway environment itself was one of the key factors of where Ravi Varma was picking up all of these beautiful little nuances. And now I want to start from the very south. And this is Kilimanur. This is where Ravi Varma was born and he died. And the photograph which you're seeing on the right, the lower right, is what they call the Chitrashale in Kilimanur. But what is interesting about this Chitrashale is, yes, this is where a lot of Ravi Varma's paintings were painted, but this was not the original studio. Why? Because Ravi Varma himself constructed this building somewhere towards the latter part of his life. Where was the earlier studio? Within the Kilimanur Palace, it is possible it was Kochukotaram, which you're seeing on the top of your screen, on the right top. It's now been restored, and this was apparently the place where Mangalabai lived. Mangalabai, Ravi Varma's sister. So these are the places within the Kilimanur Palace where Ravi Varma painted his works. One of his last works was painted here, and those were the works which finally landed up in Mysore. I'm going to show you one of them. This is the painting of Damayanti, which you're seeing on the right. And then this is a little extract of a letter which is from the divisional archives, and he says the pictures have arrived safely. So what actually happened was, Ravi Varma, towards the very end of his life, and you're looking at it as 19th of June 1906, he died in October of 1906, had to go back, paint the last few pictures. They were sent in a train all the way from there, and then now you will find them on display at the Jagan Mohan Palace. So this is where the final pictures were painted. We then move on to another studio. We look at Murthamadam in Trivandrum, Kilimanur, Trivandrum, and we also have Mavalikara. Mavalikara is where Ravi Varma's wife comes from. It is said that there were studios there too. Moving further up north, we are looking at Madras. Madras is where he actually painted the Jew, which is now on display at the museum in Madras. The diary has a beautiful entry. See, Raja Raja Varma's diary has a very beautiful entry where he actually speaks about having this person to sit for him. And he says, you know, we paid him so much of money and he actually sat for us, which is a very interesting look into the process in the studio. See, Raja Raja Varma very beautifully says the Jew unfortunately had a crooked nose. But if you look at the painting, the nose becomes straight. So, you know, some sort of facial surgery takes place there in the final work. And then we move further up north to Hyderabad. Hyderabad was a very interesting dynamic because Ravi Varma went to Hyderabad. And when he went to Hyderabad, he was actually quite looking forward to a commission from the Nizam, but he never got it. But he didn't give up. So what he does is he goes to Hyderabad and he paints that picture which you're seeing on the right from a photograph. The Nizam doesn't sit for him. From a photograph, the dynamic of photographs is very important, which we're going to come to in a bit. And he says, you know, I think the Nizam should see this. Whether the Nizam actually saw it, we don't quite know. But the Nizam never gave him a commission. So he actually sat there and at this point of time also frequented Lala Deen Dayal, Raja Deen Dayal at Hyderabad. Now we move further north and closer to home. We come to Mysore. Mysore is a beautiful place because by the time Ravi Varma's painting for Mysore, especially in 1904 onwards, there is a lot of information on this, especially from the divisional archives in Mysore. And we actually know the very building in which Ravi Varma painted it. And that you can see is from a letter. It's actually from Purna Prasad, Bangalore. Ladies and gentlemen, it's just down the road. It's just down the road. It's on Racecourse Road, Purna Prasad. The building continues to exist. And if you actually see there, it says, I have arranged both. I have arranged both for the accommodation and carriage for Raja Ravi Varma and Mysore, the late Diwan's house in which he will be put up. The late Diwan at that point of time, Sheshadri Iyer. Now, what I want to do is in Mysore, there were some very beautiful things which actually took place because now I want to tell you what actually happened inside the studio. So now we know where the studios are. Here is another letter. And this is a communication. And it says both Mr. Ravi Varma and his brother Raja Varma are very anxious to hear some Mysore music. So the studio is not just about visual art. The studio is also about music. And then there is a little thing which says, you know, Sheshanath Subarna for Veena, Bidaram Krishnappa and Vasudevachar for vocal and Gulab Jan for Hindustani. So these are the actual people who now go into Ravi Varma's studio. And there they are. We'll put some of the pictures up there. And they are singing or performing for the artist as he goes about painting the pictures which are now in the Jagan Mohan Palace and in the Sejje of the Mysore Palace. But there's another very interesting little document which I'm putting up. The brothers are keen, I'm assuming, keen on making a series of character sketches in watercolors. Why? Because they're desirous of including them, I'm assuming, into the pictures. So here's another sort of vantage into what is happening in the studio. They say, look, you know, we have all the grand sitters, but we also want to see people from Mysore, the normal people from Mysore, and they wanted to make a series of what they call character sketches. Interestingly, these character sketches are there. 3 of them are in Sri Chitra Art Gallery. 2 of them are in Sri Chitra Art Gallery, 1 in the Kozhikode Museum and 1 in the Madras Museum. So these were all made. So for, you know, she's called the milkmaid. That's the sort of title which they've given her. But technically, it's one of the character sketches which Ravi Varma made when he was in Mysore. So here are the 3 watercolors and one of them is an oil sketch. Something very interesting happened in Mysore because it was towards the end of his life. And At this time, his brother dies. C. Raja Raja Varma dies. C. Raja Raja Varma was attributed to having painted most of the landscapes, even within Ravi Varma's works. But after the death of C. Raja Raja Varma, Ravi Varma painted this in Mysore, which is the Kedda. So, possibly for the first and last time, the studio goes en plein air, which is it goes out into the open. Usually, Ravi Varma's studio was within a controlled environment, within a room, within a particular location. But in Mysore, for the first time, Ravi Varma steps out as a landscape artist. And we know that Ravi Varma did it and no one else did it, because by this time, C. Raja Raja Varma dies. The Kedda operation, which you're seeing on the left, is in the Sri Chitra Art Gallery. And I was always sort of very confused about the way in which it was painted, because it's very impressionist and sort of podgy at places. But then what I'm showing you on the right is a photograph from the Royal Collection Trust in London. And if you actually see the very same scene, possibly from the very same vantage as Ravi Varma, you will see actually how accurate the landscape is. So a lot of people say, Ravi Varma was not very good as or adapted as a landscape artist. But here is proof to sort of say, yes, he was quite good at painting landscapes too, especially towards the end of his life. Moving away from Mysore, I wish to now go into Bombay. Bombay is a very interesting space. And most of the documentation of what happens in Ravi Varma's studio actually comes from Bombay. But interestingly, I have no idea where the studio is. There's one newspaper clipping, and about 3 lines from the bottom, it says, have now been removed to Mr. Ravi Varma's temporary residence at Grant Road. None of us know where the studio is, or where Ravi Varma functioned out of in Bombay. But the photograph on the right, which is a very rare photograph and features in the second volume of the book series, is a photograph of the press, the very first location of the press. You can't quite see it, but there's a little sort of board over there which says Office Ravi Varma Fine Art Lithographic Press, Bombay. When the second volume got launched, a friend of mine and I actually went through several streets in Bombay, and we were trying to find this place. I mean, a lot has changed in Bombay. So really, I don't know where this place is. There are multiple places as to where the studio probably was in Bombay. But this is the place where most of the information comes from, which I'm going to show you in a bit. One of the decos into the studio was Balasai Pant Pratinidhi. He was the Raja of Aundh. He was an artist in his own right. And he visited Ravi Varma's studio on multiple occasions. And much later, he wrote his autobiography. And that's the cover which you're seeing on the right. And in his autobiography, he mentions a number of instances about him visiting Ravi Varma and asking Ravi Varma certain questions. Some of the questions are very interesting. One of them, he says, is, which drape do you like, especially to clothe your women? Because you've seen everything. You've seen from South India, you've gone all the way to the north. Which is the one which you like the best? And Ravi Varma replies, the Marathi Nawari sari. So he asks, why? He says, because that's the one which is the best form fitting for the woman. So in most of Ravi Varma's works, that is why you see the Nawari sari, is because he found that draping style to be the most appropriate for him. The second question which Balasai Pant Pratinidhi asks is, he says, what pigments do you use? And Ravi Varma actually replies by saying, whatever suits the occasion. I have no specific pigment range. And Balasai Pant Pratinidhi goes on to say, I don't think Ravi Varma got it right, because he was a painter too. And he refers to this painting, which you're seeing on the left, which is Damayanti Vanvas. And he says, this painting of Damayanti Vanvas, which was painted by Ravi Varma for us, Ravi Varma used a particular crimson lake for the flush in her cheeks and eyes, because she's crying at that point in time. And Balasaheb says that over the course of the years, this pigment has faded, because it's a fast pigment. And therefore, I don't think the choice of pigments were right. This is what is quoted in my book. But recently, I was at the Bhavani Singh Museum where it is on display, and I was having a conversation with Giri Kumar, a conservator, who said, Ganesh, I don't think that is right. I think what would have happened is that the varnish went brown, sepia, and probably it's because of that that you couldn't see the intensity of the color. What is beautiful about these conversations is that there are multiple ways of looking at the same work. So for those of you all, it's on a live stream on the Instagram. Please take a look at that. So this is what happens to Bombay. I'm going to come back to Bombay in a bit. We move further north to Baroda. Baroda, of course, today houses the largest private collection of Ravi Varma, and that is one of the that is a studio which has been recreated now, and now the IGNC functions out of there. I want to move further north to Udaipur. Udaipur is another place where the entire sequence of events has actually been documented in C. Raja Varma's diary. And he actually says, this is how we painted it. And one of the things which he talks about is his heavy reliance on photography. Photographs are an integral and almost now inextricable part of the Ravi Varma process in the studio. It has not been looked into in the manner in which, or with the intensity in which we have to look at it. But when a photograph and a painting come together, it is capable of being interpreted in so many ways. While the artist lifts a lot from the photograph, he also invents his own. So it's always been very interesting for me to place the photograph beside the work and actually see what Ravi Varma brings in, what Ravi Varma adds to it. Color, of course, is one of the things which he does. But in addition to that, there is a sensitivity to the final portrait which somehow you can't find in the photograph. Insofar as this Rai Pannalal Mehta, which you're seeing on the screen now, Ravi Varma actually says we had him photographed, which you're seeing on the screen. And then we did a preliminary study to chalk down his flesh tone, which also is in the middle. That's in the Sri Chitra Art Gallery. And then you have the final work. So with Rai Pannalal Mehta, you can actually see the entire process. Photograph, chalking or sort jotting down the color, the face complexion, and then the final painting. So it makes a very rare sequence which you see. Now we've seen all of these, but now let's sort of step further into the studio. Here again, Art Deco is only through photographs. Here is one of the photographs, and you see Ravi Varma there. You have a beautiful painting on an easel. This is really one of the, I mean, it's one of those things where even the photograph has been composed. It's not that it's an accidental, like we do selfies today. You just stand. No, this itself, the photograph itself is a work of art. It's composed. You stand this way, you sit this way, and then we take the photograph. But where these paintings actually made, so let's look at some of them, and many of them we can't even find today. Take a look at that. That is a postcard, and you can see it's taken from the painting, but we don't know where the painting is. Even today we don't quite know where the painting is. Here, let's look at another one, because can you see this painting is in Kilimanur. It's an unfinished work, probably never got completed, continues to remain in the family archive. And then you can see it in the photograph also on the right of the screen. So this is actually Ravi Varma's very functional studio. That's what I'm trying to say. Let's look at the easel. The easel, which you're seeing there, finally lands up in the Sri Chitra Art Gallery. Right at the very end, you can see it over there. I want to offer you another vantage into the studio, and this is in a sketch. This is a sketch by Ravi Varma. It's in Ravi Varma's sketchbook. And then everybody's wondering, who is that person? Is it Ravi Varma himself painting? And it isn't. And how do we know that? Is because much later, his son Rama Varma actually sends a little postcard and he says, I'm glad that you found the sketchbook useful. The sketch you mentioned is not my father who paints. It is his brother, and the onlookers are his nephew and a Nambudri Brahmin who has married one of my father's nieces. again a deco into the fact that the Ravi Varma studio was almost like an atelier. It had a whole bunch of people who were working together, and Ravi Varma himself chooses to document who these other artists in the studio are. Now, this is one set of what is happening within the studio. But how did Ravi Varma actually create the image? So we're going to go one step further. I've shown you where the studios are. I've given you and offered you a deco into who the artists are and how the studio kind of looks. But now let's get into the actual creation of the image. And how did I find these? So a little bit of personal stories are going to start getting over here. Uh, when I was writing the book, one of the places I visited was Kilimanur. Kilimanur is where Ravi Varma was born, died, and most of the archival material which Ravi Varma referred to continues to remain in Kilimanur. Ravi Varma had a huge library of art books. Most of them were German, English, a whole series of them. And when I went about writing the book, the family was kind enough to make the entire library available to me. And I want to show you what the process of me writing the books were. And that's how it looked. A scanner, a laptop, and surrounded by none other than Ravi Varma's books. These were the very books which Ravi Varma was referring to. I'm going to show you some of the books because a whole bunch of images to show you that this is how Ravi Varma's collection looked. It had stamps. It said Ravi Varma on them, and this is the art journal. And then the one on the left is actually a very rare book because it says Kilimanur Kilake Moodatha Madam. The Kilake Moodatha Madam was in Trivandrum. It was very briefly in Trivandrum. So the Kilimanur Moodatha Madam is the place in Trivandrum of the Kilimanur family. These books offer a very interesting vantage into where Ravi Varma composes his pictures. It almost makes you question the originality of the work. How much of it was derived and how much of it was copied and how much of it was derived and how much of it is original. And the only way in which you will get this abstraction of what I have said is by looking at this. The one on the right, there have been a lot of people who have said multiple things. They said, oh, you know, it is reminiscent of Edward Manet's Olympia. I don't think Ravi Varma actually saw Edward Manet's Olympia, but he certainly saw this. And this big why? Because it's from the library. What I want you to take a look at is one, of course, the pose is identical. The placement of the book is identical. Even that little pillow on which she sort of languishes identical, and even almost the carpet pattern is identical. So here, when you look at this, you wonder how much was original. Clearly, Ravi Varma worked on it, but the composition clearly was also borrowed. And this is what's beautiful if you get into the space of the studio. And this is probably why the studio is never seen, is because everybody wants to try and say, I don't want to be judged. This is how I'm creating the work. So here's an instance where, and a reason why the studio is kept very silent. Now I'm moving on into a slightly more complicated space because I want to move into the photographs. When did photography actually become an integral part of the studio? Because from now, all you're going to see is photographs. And you're going to look at photographs and you're going to look at paintings and you're going to look at processes. But how do you think photography actually came in? And here is one possible way in which it happened. Ravi Varma had exhibited at the Bombay Art Society exhibition in 1893. And when he exhibited, it was titled The Missing Diamond. The painting is missing. But when he did it, there was a review in the Times of India, 1893. And I'm going to read the review because it's quite a harsh review. And that's the beauty of the work on Ravi Varma, because it's quite analytical. It's not differential to the work of the artist. He actually says, you see, there is no knowledge of anatomy, no modeling, no careful study. It is all shuffled and hardly even suggested. This artist could afford to fit himself with a good studio and surround himself with those accessories without which an artist cannot set to work at such subjects as he chooses. Local artists who come from Europe and know what he requires and how he ought to fix up a good studio will be glad to advise and help him. He will then be able to train a few models and have them at hand. For some reason, post 1893, we see a whole bunch of photographs. Till then, we see photographs mostly of sitters, like Rani Chimnabai, even Mysore, the princess. There are photographs of them, but these were commissioned works. But what about the Lakshmis? What about the Saraswatis? What about these general pictures? For some reason, post 1893, lots of photographs we find. I would like to say it probably was because of the criticism. So Ravi Varma takes stock of it and then he says, okay, now we have to sort of pull our socks up and figure out how to deal with it. One of the sketches which you're seeing on the left of the screen is somebody who's sitting, probably an artist. I would like to venture a guess by saying Frank Brooks. And this is probably how Frank Brooks enters the studio. I'm venturing a guess, it's probably more probable. That is also probably Frank Brooks, although we have no idea that it is. But most importantly, you see a very complicated camera. So the camera has entered the studio, well and truly entered the studio by 1893. But where were the photographs? So I finished. Now, again, going back into a little bit of a backstory of how I went about writing the book. The family had made available the library. I went about scanning everything. Everything was done. And I thought my work was finished at Kilimanur. So I packed up the scanner and I was actually walking down the stairs to catch the flight. And for some strange reason, I turned back to Ram Varma ji and I said, where is the box? He looked at me very sort of startled. He says, what do you mean box? I said, I don't know. I don't even know why I asked it. He said, where's the box? He says, because you're asking me, I'll show you the box. So off we went into the depths of the Kilimanjaro. It's a huge palace. It's not a very flamboyant building, but it's large. It's a very extensive building after building after building. So he takes me somewhere into the depths of the palace, and then there's a teakwood box. It's quite a large box. It's about that big, and it's about that high. And he says, Ganesh, you asked for it. Open the box. And I opened the box, and the lid broke. And inside the box were all the photographs. Photographs of so many models, the ones who helped Ravi Varma actually create the pictures. And it just so happened that I took a photograph of the box when I opened it, and I'm going to show it to you because this is part of the Ravi Varma legacy. And that's the box when I opened it, which you're seeing on the left of the screen. And you can see the hinge, it's actually the lid breaks. And inside it was a veritable treasure of photographs of people in the Ravi Varma studio. So we went about documenting everything, then it was cleaned up, and then you see it on the right, the hinge, and then of course the hinge comes back, the lid comes back, all of that. This box contains a part of Indian heritage, which the artistic legacy continues to dominate the entire subcontinent, because this is where most of the images which you're now going to see comes about. But in the process of there being a formal aspect of the image, there's also an informal aspect to the photograph, as I'm going to show you now. And this is what's rare about these photographs. Ganesh, why are you showing us this photograph? You can hardly see the face. I mean, it's a damaged photograph. It's of some random sitter who's sitting cross-legged. Why are you even showing us this photograph? Because I don't want to show you the sitter. I want to draw your attention to the reflection in the mirror. That is Ravi Varma. In the studio, inadvertently, he's of course composing the way in which this person sits. He's probably saying, do this, do that, sit this way, sit that way, put your feet up or whatever, look in that direction. He is certainly doing that, and inadvertently his image falls in the reflection. Now, that image I want you to bear in mind because you're going to see him maybe later. Kudumi, which is the tuft which you have, that is Ravi Varma. And that is him in his studio, busily running about saying, sit this way, and telling the photographer, photograph that. Which is why it makes this photograph very, very important to how the studio functions. So Ravi Varma not only composed the painting, he composed the photograph itself. And then he sort of lifts the composition and then translates it into a painting. Now let us look at some other photographs. This, of course, I storied. Photograph on the left, I want you to see, and the right, I want you to see the window frame. Can you see the window frame? And then look at the painting. It's the same window, it's the same location where Ravi Varma picks it up. And then the photograph which you're seeing on the left of your screen has a particular table. Even the table comes into the painting. Can you see that? It's the exact table, it's the exact window frame. So we're not only talking about people, which we're going to get to in a bit, we're also talking about the environment of the studio, which actually lands into the final painting. This is what the studio actually looked like. I'm going to give you one more instance. So let us look at the photograph on the right. This is a girl. I don't even know who she is. In fact, in all of these, we don't quite know who this person is. And you see the photograph on the right. Ravi Varma exactly replicates it into a painting, including that sort of rickety stool on which he's sitting. One would have imagined Ravi Varma's chairs to be a little more beautiful and ornate and all that, but no, this time the actual stool comes into the final painting. But what is also interesting is you see what's in the background. You see on the top right, there is a painting of a girl, I'm assuming at a water tap. We don't know where the painting is, but you can actually see a sketch of it. So possibly it was used for a painting, but we don't know where the painting is. So much of the legacy is yet to be sort of addressed. And then he's painting Mohini. Can you see the Mohini? It's you can sort of half obscured in the photograph and then the painting. So you can actually see that Ravi Varma sort of going through this process of painting the Mohini, and then he's finished some picture of a girl at a water tap. And then of course this painting in the center goes on to become a chromolithograph titled Sita. So here's another advantage. Now I want to get into specific people, because we've spoken of the models, we speak of the environment of the studio, but now we have to talk about how and who goes about creating the picture. The artist, of course, we're not going to question Ravi Varma here, but we also have to talk about who helps him create the image. And this is where I think we should look past the end of our nose, because now I'm going to throw debate to all of you all. And I want to start with Lakshmi. It's a painting is on the right. And this is the girl posing. What is she doing? She's holding pencils in her hand. And this girl, the photograph, of course, the face is idealized. Idealization of the face is a very common trait with Ravi Varma. Even with sitters with whom he's doing portraits, there is an idealization of the face. Certainly with the goddess. There's no two ways about it at all. Who is she? Because she's part of the image building process, and it's very important for us to understand who she is. Her name is Rajibai Mulgaonkar. What is more important is that she was a Kalavant. And there are a lot of diary entries about how she comes to the studio on frequent occasions with her son. She is crying, she's going through a bad patch in her life. All of this is in Sri Raja Varma's diary. But none of us actually knew that for over 130 years, we've been praying to an image in which a Kalavant posed. She's a Devadasi basically. So it's a very interesting dynamic. And I'm going to come back to the dynamic towards the end. Here is one instance. The second is this. For those of you all who've been following today's Instagram story, why are you posing like that? And here again, we go back to the box. That box not only had a whole bunch of photographs, it had a very rare set of glass plate negatives. They're not very big, they're about that big. And I lifted all of them up, and I looked at one of them, and it had someone posing as Damayanti. You can't make out because it's quite small, it's about that big. And that's the photograph with all the stacked glass plate negatives. You'll actually see it on the left. And my very trusted scanner, you can see that there. Fortunately, I bought a sort of high-end scanner. Hema said, you're going to do this book, splurge on the scanner. So I splurged on the scanner, thank God for that. And this scanner could scan glass plate negatives. So I said, okay, great. I put it into that, and the image starts coming on my screen. It's scanning high res, right? And I was shocked when I saw who posed for Damayanti. And I'm going to show this to you now. And this features and is published for the first time in the 4th volume of the book series. There you go. Do you know who that is? You remember the boy with the kudumi? That's why I said boy with the kudumi. That's Ravi Varma, wearing a sari. Pulls up his kurta sleeves like that and poses. For what? Damayanti. I was actually quite shocked when I saw it. I said, really? Then, of course, you have a completely new take to the painting now, because suddenly you're going and seeing the painting and you're saying, those feet are big. I think it because Ravi Varma couldn't get his proportions right. The hip is a little not very feminine, it's quite masculine, because he just couldn't get foreshortening right. And now it sort of makes, when you look at the painting, I'm not seeing a woman anymore, at least to me. So when I was asked to curate the Sri Chitra Art Gallery, I have to tell you this sort of backstory of what happened. Dr. Venu asked me, Ganesh, why have you put the Damayanti right in the center? So when you enter the Sri Chitra Art Gallery, the first thing you'll see is Damayanti. I said, because it's Ravi Varma. To my mind, it's Ravi Varma. He said, what are you talking about? And I showed him this photograph, and he was also quite puzzled. He says, really? I said, yes. What is interesting here is that much later, the postal department decided to do a commemorative stamp on Ravi Varma. And for some strange reason, without even knowing of the existence of this photograph, they chose Damayanti. And then they put a tiny photograph of him within the Damayanti. So I'm saying, like, the 2 in 1. But look at the serendipity of it. No one quite knew that it was Ravi Varma who posed. Then goes on, the postage stamp has 2 Ravi Varmas in it. So again, this sort of beautiful dynamic comes out in when you look at how the studio functions. When it came into the book series, one of the questions was, Ganesh, are you going to be criticized? I said, well, if anyone, I'm putting in an actual document, this is actually what happened. Why should we be criticized? He says, gender roles. How am I to answer it? This is actually what happened. It brings up huge questions in relation to gender stereotypes. And that, I think, is what volume 4 is going to do in another way too. I'm going to show you another photograph. But what is interesting is I want to show you, so this is dynamic of the actual artist posing for the work is not unusual. And the reason why it is possibly not unusual is, again, the dearth of materials in the studio. Sometimes you just won't get the model. And you have to just go about finishing whatever work of art you're going to do. Why else would Ravi Varma have worn a sari? Think about it. Possibly at that given point in time, there was no model. So he says, okay, listen, I'm a professional. I have to just get the job done. This is how the Nawari sari is worn. I'm going to wear it. I'm going to get it and get on with it. That's what he does. The artist becoming the model and therefore generating the work of art, which they themselves create. There's another very beautiful example. I'm going to show you another very unseen process. And let's see if you can tell me who this is. Do you know who that is? Arun Yogiraj. So he is inspired by Ravi Varma's Shankaracharya. And then he has to take this two-dimensional image and make it into a three-dimensional image. So he says, Ganesh, I can see the Shankaracharya as Ravi Varma has done it, but I have to take this and make it into a sculpture. So how do I know what goes on all the sides? So Arun himself sits and poses as Shankaracharya, just as Ravi Varma posed for Damayanti. And here again, beautiful vantage into the working process and in the studio. And I think there is some element of maybe they're shy to tell people this is how it is. And this is possibly the reason why the studio is shrouded in secrecy. And now I'm going to bring up another person. We're going to slightly step out of Ravi Varma for the last two slides. I've done Arun Yogiraj now. And I'm going to do this. This also features in the 4th volume of the book series. Who is he posing as? What was his name? His name was Sardar, P. Sardar. He was a great Hanuman Bhakt, very great Hanuman Bhakt. There's very little written about him. He was such a great Hanuman Bhakt that he hit the gym, as you can evidently see, builds his body, puffs his face, poses as Hanuman. He was such a great Hanuman Bhakt. But he was a Muslim. And that came out in small circles, but it never came out in large circles. And he's one of the most revered artists in the Bombay area, the Marathi area, Sardar. And everybody will say, Sardar, Hanuman, Hanuman, Sardar. But he was a Muslim. So I asked the question, does devotion transcend religion? Because if you're a devotee, how does it make any difference? And this is what you get to see when you look at the studio. I want to conclude by coming to this. I'm going to put all three of them together, and I want to now move slightly outside the studio. And this is the concluding slide. What I find about the studio, when you look at the studio, what you find is that it is a space which has no judgment. What do I mean? A Devadasi can go on to become Lakshmi. A male can go on to become a female. And a Muslim can go on to become a Hindu god. And there is something so sacred about the studio space, because this is the space where none of this is questioned. None of this is questioned. But once the work of art is created and the work of art moves out of the studio, you have criticism, you have judgment, of course, you have appreciation too. And there's an interesting dynamic at this stage where the work of art does not relate back to the process to most of us. Lakshmi is Lakshmi, but how do we know that this was the girl? So you have a studio space which has no judgment, and then you have the work of art which is criticized or appreciated. And when you look at this dynamic, where it goes from a sacred space of no judgment into an open space where everybody is looking, talking, criticizing, appreciating, I ask the question as to whether the dynamic between the studio and the work of art and the artistic legacy is the same parallel dynamic of our thought and action. Because what we think is beautiful. There's no judgment in thought. But when you take that thought and put it into action, my God, everybody starts commenting. In your mind, the tune is always better, but when you sing it, there's judgment. In your mind, you can love anybody, you can love anything, no questions asked. But the minute you express it, judgment. And is the reason for the studio secrecy the same reason why we never express our thoughts? That we are going to be judged all the time. And this is what I see when I look at the studio being a sacred space, a non-judgmental space, versus the artistic legacy being judged, which is a very similar parallel to how we think and how we act. It would be beautiful if neither were judged. But I think we're a long way to that. So I want to conclude by saying, I want all of you all to rethink about how we judge others in their actions, because finally it came from a sacred space. Thank you. Happy to take questions. Oh, yes, yes. I think they're going to circulate a mic because it's also being live streamed, is what I'm told.
Thank you. That was absolutely brilliant and a fantastic philosophical ending. If you could just go back to that particular slide where you had the window frames. Yeah. The one on the extreme right, would you think that is the origin of the Kadambari?
One portion of it is Kadambari, one portion of it is Damayanti.
Okay, the extreme right, the one who is
Yes.
holding the veena.
Yes, so if you see that girl who's fanning,
Yeah.
that portion, that part of the composition you will see in a painting which goes on to become a chromolithograph titled Damayanti.
Yeah.
And the one of the lady who's languishing, having presumably sort of gone to sleep with her melody, a bit of Kadambari, and then there's another version of it in a private collection.
Okay, because the way she's sitting with the cross leg is exactly the same as what you would find in the Kadambari.
Kadambari and also Saraswati.
Okay,
Also Saraswati.
thank you.
Ganesh, as usual, you're brilliant, and you opened our eyes to so much, which I did know that the studio was a sacred space, but didn't know what all went behind it the way you had explained. One thing about that Lakshmi, because we've all seen it in our grandmother's puja room and this thing. Did he keep this away, you think, and only you discovered it because he wanted this to be a sacred, kind of a thing whom you, of course, no judgment, but you're devoted to? Because we see this everywhere. And then later on, of course, with his printing machine, which he got from Germany, I think he made a whole lot of thing, which is also part of the calendar art. So, do you think he kept that away because of the Devdasi image and this as the sacred image? Do you think he did it deliberately?
There are no records that he actually intended to keep it away, but I think generically most artists do not talk about process. Most artists just refuse to acknowledge the process of image building. So it languishes in an archive, like Ravi Varma's languishes in an archive for the longest time. Did Ravi Varma keep it away specifically because she was a Kalavant? I don't think so. I don't think Ravi Varma was one of those people who judged. Having said that, um, there are multiple new sort of new decos into what happened to Ravi Varma's legacy in course of time. You see Raja Varma's diaries. Just to try and tell you how much of Ravi Varma's legacy has actually been whittled down or expunged. Ravi Varma, see Raja Varma, Ravi Varma's brother, his diaries were originally handwritten. 1962, Srinivasan Poti retranscribes them into another diary. For the longest time, we thought that was the only record until recently, where I actually saw the original diaries. And you can actually see that between the original diaries, which ended somewhere in 1905, to the 1962 one, there's a lot of expunging. But that's all we had access to. So who did not want it seen? I don't think it was Ravi Varma. It is probably the later custodians.
Hello. Yeah, I just appreciate your work,
Oh,
the
there. Yes.
message and whatever you have just given us. So I just wanted to point out, like, whatever we are seeing right now with the new era of Instagram and the social media, what we mostly get viral clips of behind the scenes. So he is a much envisioned person who envisioned it and kept that behind scenes and kept the image, something like that. Whatever you have seen, the Lakshmi's image might be his behind the scene work, what he has captured. What do you feel like is envisioning capacities and
Again, I don't think Ravi Varma as such would have looked at um, wanting to sort of push one segment of the legacy away. I think for him it was just part of the process. I don't think Ravi Varma as such would have, one, intentionally done it, and two, actually had the time to do all of this, because he was a very, very busy man. He was painting. So I don't think Ravi Varma would have intentionally pushed something behind the scenes and then sort of pushed something to the front. If he was commissioned, he just went about painting it. So I don't think Ravi Varma would have done it. But yes, much later people possibly said, we don't want people to see who posed. We don't want. And when it came to me writing the book, I only was supported. They just made everything available to me, and then they said, Ganesh, go for it. You figure it out. And I have not got a single objection from anyone in any place by saying, Ganesh, you can't. So I think the family now is very supportive of relooking at the legacy, and so do so many other custodians.
Very, very insightful talk. I had a question about the Khedda. You
Yes.
said that that's landscape en plein air.
Yes.
I was wondering whether uh, is there documentation to show that he went to see the Khedda operations,
Yes.
or would he possibly have looked at the photograph also? Is that something
Yes.
that's
So the divisional archives in that one. Yes. So the divisional archives in Mysore actually has a whole series of correspondence, because Ravi Varma was in Mysore at the pleasure of the Maharaja. And therefore, every time he entered and sort of went back, he had to inform the Maharaja that I'm going. And in one of the letters, he actually mentions, I've been invited to the levee in Madras. So he goes to Madras and then he comes back, and he comes back along with the Duke. So we actually know he actually went there.
also? I just had a question about the landscape behind the Lakshmi in the background. Are those so the Lakshmi figure, one can see parallels and see that it was posed, but what about the landscape?
The landscape, there is no document of this particular landscape. I've not been able to find a reference image to that. Some other paintings we've been able to, for example, Vishwamitra Menaka, we've been able to actually find a reference image where Ravi Varma lifted that particular composition. Apart from that, for this Lakshmi, I think it was an imagined landscape. One. Two, I think it probably was even done by C. Raja Varma. The landscape portion of it may have been done by C. Raja Varma. But this exact landscape, I've not been able to find a reference image.
Hi, very fascinating talk. Thank you so much. So, on the same subject, I've been long fascinated by the fact that our idea of goddess, a lot of our goddesses have been created by a person who was trained in the Western style of painting, and now this Devdasi thing is a different spin on it. I'm just kind of curious to before this, what was the general idea of Lakshmi in the public perception? Would you have any thoughts on
Yes,
that?
so the third volume of the book series, we have to start the visual narrative somewhere because the Lakshmi narrative goes all the way back to coins. For example, there are images of Gajalakshmi which have been found in coins way all the way back. And that has continued to rule the iconography of Lakshmi for the longest time. Insofar as my book series is concerned, I had to start the narrative somewhere. So I started the narrative with how the printing presses looked at it. Why? Why did I choose that point in the narrative and not go further back? Is because to me, the dynamic of Ravi Varma is largely associated with the democracy of the visual image, which goes on to then change the religious image. So for me, that was only done through the printing presses. And therefore, for me, I start with the Calcutta Art Studio. And with the Calcutta Art Studio, which is where I begin the narrative and exploration, the Lakshmi is different. One, it's very much in a Bengali style. The Vahan is an owl. So that's where I begin the narrative. Of course, much prior to that, you have the Gajalakshmi seated on a lotus with the elephants on either side. And a lot of iconographic, a lot of research has been done on iconography. Recent meaning Mummadi Krishna Rajavadiya's 9 volumes of Sri Tattvanidhi, and then you have Gopinath Rao, 4 volumes, and then now recently you have S.K. Ramchandra Rao's 6 volumes. So a lot of work has been done on iconography.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Ganesh. Thank you for this illuminating talk this evening.
Oh,
here.
there you are.
Hi.
Huh.
Regarding your recent discoveries, right, of Raja Ravi Varma using lifting or deriving his compositions and his exclusive use of photographs for his paintings, right? In your mind, how did the image of Ravi Varma as an artist or a painter change post your discoveries?
Oh, in multiple ways. One is it brings about the debate on originality, right? Does it have to be? Is innovation radical or is innovation incremental? Right? If and then if you look at the dynamic of innovation, you get into other forms of innovation too. This, of course, is visual innovation, compositional innovation. But if you look at innovation in other ways also, the general understanding has been that during peacetime, innovation is incremental. It's in small bits and pieces. Radical innovation takes place only when you are at crisis. There's war, there's natural calamity, and this is when society has to stand up and do something very radical, which is why most of the radical innovations have taken place during war. Ravi Varma, and if you were to apply that understanding to what Ravi Varma did, Ravi Varma's innovation was incremental. In many ways incremental. In some ways radical, because that was an interesting period in India where we were synthesizing multiple things, not just visual understanding. Take, for example, The way in which we sit, we went from sitting on the floor to chairs. Look at the way in which we started attiring ourselves. We went into, shirts and suits and all of that. Look at the way in which we were eating. Suddenly the cutlery comes out. And then not to mention the language you and I are speaking in. So India was absorbing and assimilating and synthesizing and incrementally innovating. Ravi Varma participated in that. Oh, yes.
Hi. Like, it's a question, criticism, judgment, whatever.
Judgment's over it.
No, judgment's
Okay.
overrated, but it expresses itself in the form of criticism.
Go for it.
Okay. So the first part is you just mentioned how India was, it wasn't India or whatever. It was transforming itself to the point where we are discussing in a language that didn't exist back then. The people, which Ravi Varma shows,
Okay, go for it.
Ravi Varma shows, okay, don't use the class difference as what I want to highlight
Class as in?
in every form. And especially where the only one who participated, you say, is Raja Ravi Varma. But don't you think it comes from the point of pure privilege? Because if he wasn't Ravi Varma, he would have been lost in history. We got great paintings, great works, everything. And this person, this is the second part, this person you see is in a place where the painting gets the judgment, the criticism. But isn't the studio also the place where the judgment, the criticism is born so that the painting is bloomed? Thank you.
Okay. Lots of questions. One, privilege. Right? Until the advent of the Ravi Varma press, which interestingly didn't belong to Ravi Varma, it belonged to his brother, art was in a large sense privileged. And so was religion. Because access to places of worship, except folk, tribal, let's not go there, because that's a different kind of microclimate. Right? Large scapes of religion until the Temple Entry Proclamation of 1930 is, I'm forgetting the exact, Chitra Tirunal of Travancore, even places of worship were privileged. Right? So art until the advent of the Ravi Varma press and until the Ravi Varma. Now here again, okay, I want to clarify because I don't want people running after me and saying only Ravi Varma press. No, there were a number of other presses also which were functioning. You had the Chitrashala press, you had the Mysuru Mutrakshara Shala, you had so many others. You had the Calcutta Art Studio, you had so many others also working at and lot come later. So all of these together, they break privilege in art and access to art. And what's breaking it even further is digital, which is a great thing. So all of us get our WhatsApps and this and that and all of that. That's all part of that trajectory. Until the Ravi Varma press came, which is largely where everybody gets to see the same mold of Lakshmi, art was privileged. Right? Nothing can be done about that. So was religion. It is only much later that democracy of art, democracy of religion, democracy of power also takes place. That's a much later mental process. And it's only now that we even understand entitlement. Right? But that's very new. It's very new. You're looking at something which happened over a century and a half ago from the lens of today. It's difficult for you to parallel them. What was the second portion? I forgot. The studio and the judgment of the studio. Right. You're able to judge the studio only because I showed it to you now. Again, coming back to the fact that no one got a deco into the studio. It's only now that you're all thinking and then saying, oh my God, this Devadasi. You all didn't know it till now. Yes, go for it. As in, Sorry.
As an artist, you can just reverse engineer any form of art. You would just question its origin.
Yeah.
You may not necessarily do it, but you can.
You can, because there is no start and there is no end. We are all part of a continuum in every way. So again, question, where's the originality? Is it incremental? Is it participatory in a long continuum of things? These are all questions which are coming up. See, here, I want to say something else. Simply because you're now seeing this, right? Should you all withdraw from innovation? No. You have to participate in the innovation. You can't all sit back and then say, all I'm adding is 2 more grams to this one. Because how many grains make a heap? It's always been like that. You have to keep pushing the narrative forward, even if you're going to do it in homeopathic doses. That's how evolution takes place. You don't agree?
I agree, but the point was a bit different. Like, I think.
Oh, sorry.
That was
Okay,
lost
I
in
went off
translation.
onto a tangent
Yeah.
then.
Oh, no. The idea was so, yeah, we may call, but the necessity of this invention, discovery of yours, puts a new question, like you said.
Yes.
We are looking back at history with a new lens.
Yes.
So that's what I was highlighting, the importance of that new lens, the new perspective we have gained.
Good. Please read the book volume series. There's a lot of stuff.
Sure.
Yes.
Hi, Ganesh.
You may hate Ravi Varma at the end of it. Don't blame me. Yes. I don't know who's speaking.
Hi,
Oh,
Ganesh.
there. Yes.
Great talk as usual. I want to ask whether Ravi Varma stands unique in this aspect, because you've had like sort of contemporary painters like M.V. Durandar and Haldankar also, who also ventured into this, maybe not to this extent. But is there any evidence that they followed similar processes,
Yes.
hid these
Yes.
background behind the scenes from the public, and it's come out later?
Yeah.
Or does Varma stand out like very unique from them?
A lot of work is now being done on Durandar. I've had the privilege of seeing a whole bunch of sketches by Durandar, and again, archival photographs of how he worked on it. Durandar also, and Durandar came from the JJ school. So when it came, and there they structured the way in which they. So yes, a lot of the others did it. Insofar as live sittings, I think Durandar would have done more, and Ravi Varma would have done less. But photography was integral and continues to remain integral for long periods of time after that. I think there's even Babu Rao painters. Where did I see that? And then J.P. Singhal. J.P. Singhal's photograph archive is fantastic. Sort of a very interesting, I'll say interesting photographic art. Yes.
Here.
Yes.
Here, Ganesh. Thanks.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So it was beautiful as usual. So I would tell that, the process still continues. Yesterday I had been to an art gallery. So the artist spoke that he uses the pictures even now, like the photos to generate. And the next thing is like, as artists, a creative mind also goes through this highs and lows. And he was a responsible artist. He wanted to keep whatever he started running. So, but you don't have the continuous, the brilliance at all levels. So it's okay to take help of the photographs. It is okay to take help of different things, because as long as you're producing work, you become like, from an artist, you're going on to becoming like a factory worker, like, because the demands of those times were like that, right? So he was a brilliant artist, and he was a responsible artist, trying to continue to give outputs, he never wanted to dip. He just wanted to keep on delivering. So all these things should not be a negative, but it should be a positive for the artist.
Thank you. Here I'm going to tell you a little bit more. Ravi Varma, if you were to look at the way he functioned, I think Ravi Varma, like Van Gogh, did go through manic depression. You can understand it through the output of his work. And as you rightly mentioned, I think there were phases where he just couldn't be as inventive as he probably had to be, and used multiple aids to do it. The concept of and the problem associated with the creative community, especially which is this bipolar disorder of manic depression, is a very important thing which I think has to be looked into and normalized. It's easy to say normalized, but it's more difficult to actually do it. And I think a lot of very laudable work is being done in that regard. But if you were to look at the way in which Ravi Varma functioned, although there are no direct documents on it, I think he was going through. All of them did. Fortunately, like Van Gogh didn't cut off his ear and all, but otherwise I think he did have his phases. Yes. Are those? Not on this PPT. And it is not visible in the sense of in the painting the strokes become weak. Not like that. But if you look at the way in which suddenly there's a spur of paintings, then it drops. Then again suddenly he paints. Then he drops like that. He stops painting. He stops painting. So it is cyclic. It goes like that. So there's suddenly this sudden, he paints fabulous works everywhere, and then suddenly where is he? He just vanishes. We don't know what happens to him. Sorry, 1 minute. Mic there, please, because I'm not able to. Oh, sorry. Can you pause on that, please? I'd love to hear that. Yes.
Thank you for the amazing presentation. My question is like the technology of photography. So I'm not sure like at what age Ravi Varma was there that this technology was there, or is it from the beginning? But I am sure there must be a point of bifurcation where he started using this technology as a mainstream in his paintings. I mean, that's an assumption I am making.
1893.
Okay. So my question is, there are two questions. First, suppose if there have been no invention of photography, what would have been his style? The second question is, why he didn't use previous iconographies from temples or the other places, rather than using this medium? Was a reason.
Okay, let's go step by step. Photography was well and truly in the courts, certainly in the courts at the time Ravi Varma was alive. So Ravi Varma had access to photography, even from very early on. Even from very, very early on. There is even now a recent photograph of an 1870 painting of Kilkapat Krishna Menon. So whether that was from the painting or whether that was the reference image, we don't know. But photography was well and truly in vogue among elite circles at the time Ravi Varma was alive. So there's no doubt of that. When it becomes a mainstay in Ravi Varma's process, I would like to assume 1893. Few photographs before that do exist, but the major upsurge is after 1893. So this is the second thing. 3. Did Ravi Varma actually dwell on iconographic representations much prior to photography? Yes. For example, if you were to look at the way in which he paints Mohini, volume 5, it's not yet out, it is an identical replica of a mural which was always there, including the painting of Vishnu Maya, which is very rare. What is Vishnu Maya? In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Mohini takes her avatar, continues to distribute, resumes her form back to Vishnu. Shiva comes and asks, I'm given to understand you manifested yourself into such a beautiful I would like to see the form. Vishnu comes back as a second Mohini. He lusts after her, and the version is that that is how Hariharaputra was born. In the Malabar region, that scene is very sacred. Very sacred. You will find murals of it in a lot of temples. Ravi Varma painted it, and it's almost an exact replica of the mural. So was he, even Ram Pattabhishekam, which you find in volume 4, you'll find the reference mural for it. So Ravi Varma did lift from sources other than photography too. He lifted extensively from Kathakali, which is not the subject matter of the talk today. Extensively he lifts from Kathakali. Stage convention, skin tone, gestures, all comes from Kathakali. So Ravi Varma takes it from multiple sources, not just photography.
Good evening.
Yes. Yes. Huh. In volume 3, I was able to find a reference photograph only for Shankaracharya, not the disciples. I could not find a reference image to the others, but the reference image for the Shankaracharya is Sachidanand Shivabhinav Narasimha Swamigalu of Sringeri. It finds a place in volume 3. A lot of the material is not available. I'm assuming he painted it for the press. But the guru of the Travancore family is Sringeri. So there's a connection there. Yes.
Good evening. Amazing talk, by the way.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask something since you ended on that note of idea of judging. So is it possible through the archives and journals that there were artists or figures that did judge his process through the studio phases that he did go through? So
Yeah.
could you give some insight to that?
Yes, like I showed you that newspaper article, trenchant criticism. When he actually displayed it at the Bombay Art Society exhibition, there was very trenchant criticism.
I mean, were there any artists who, I know the news was there, like
Yes,
artists?
Balasai Pant Pratinidhi, who actually was in a sense a Shishya of, not really a Shishya, but he did visit Ravi Varma's studio. He actually criticizes the process and says, look at him using Crimson Lake and it's faded. Yes, there has been criticism of people who've actually seen Ravi Varma work.
Okay, thanks.
There was a lady here who had no, she had a question on.
Yeah, what you said about the cycles of his create. Yeah, what I was saying is, when they just cycles of creative energy, like a spurt of art, and then a low phase, and then again a spurt of art.
You can see it, for example, before and after the Sri Chitra Art Gallery Commission, between the Udaipur and Mysore Commission. Then he sort of is very low when he goes to Hyderabad. You can see it between the Baroda Commission, and for a long period there's nothing. Yeah, you can actually see that going like that. Yeah.
Hi, Ganesh.
Oh, there, yes.
Enlightening talk as always.
Thank
so
you.
my friends here and I, we have a question about the box. We're curious about how do you know about the box or what made you ask of it?
I don't know. I know, it is questioning. I mean, I have questioned the process myself, and it's important to question the process. I don't know why I asked. I really don't know why I asked, and that too to ask something for something which is that pivotal and would go on to completely alter the narrative in my book series. So it wasn't some stray painting which I was asking for, which may have featured, may not have featured. If I can step into how if I can talk about my experience in writing the book series, there have been multiple instances where my intuition told me certain things. And a lot of our authors have had that experience where it's not all you. And I think that is something which all of us must understand, that not everything which we do is about us. There are other intangible forces, if I can use that word, which work through you into getting certain things done, or to ask certain questions. And I've had that experience when I wrote this book series, not just with the box, but multiple other things. You should do a BTS with me and how I wrote the book. That's another one volume in itself. But it's interesting, because at least I would acknowledge the fact that it was not all me. And I would love to acknowledge the fact that it was not all me. So I don't know why I asked, but I did ask, and then everything came out.
Thank you. There's another question.
Yes.
When is the book launch for Volume 4 in Bangalore?
When is the book launch for Volume 4 in Bangalore? You are from MAP, and I'm wary to answer that. But yes, soon. Soon, very soon. Yes.
Hi, Ganesh. No, firstly, I think super insightful, and I really appreciate the dedication that you have for Ravi Varma's. I think if I really look at the legacy, what really inspires me is that Ravi Varma's lithographs are in almost all our homes, right? And the Lakshmis and whatnot. So I'm just curious as to what are those market realities that kind of help that dissipate into mainstream cultures across all of these years, especially at that time. I think, of course, lithographs have been that kind of second wave for him. There was that wave of patronage through paintings, and then the lithographs themselves were spread across India. So, what were those market realities, and how is your study kind of got you deeper into that understanding?
Okay. Market realities, I'm assuming you're looking at it from a commercial point of view.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. That helps. Everybody's been asking me this question, especially after 167 crores. I wish I'd made that money, but okay. But it brings up a very interesting question. This is how I wish to answer it. There are multiple ways of looking at the commerce of art, right? One, what Ravi Varma thought. In the diary of Sri Raja Varma, there is a notation to the effect where Sri Raja Varma says, my brother made so much of money, didn't quite care for it, otherwise he would have been the richest man. There's actually a diary note. So we know that Ravi Varma himself was not quite interested in the market dynamic or the commerce of it as a person. But Ravi Varma's commissions were highly paid. So we do know that Ravi Varma, because we have archives in Mysore, Baroda, Trivandrum, where we know he was paid very highly. So we do know he, as a painter, as a person, didn't care for money. As a painter, made lot of money. This much we know. Now we come to the market dynamic in relation to the chromolithographs. The general understanding has been more supply, less demand, and therefore less value. This is the general understanding. But here's another point of view. The BBC, I think about 2012, I don't know, about 10, 15 years ago, came out with a documentary, a very interesting documentary, which challenged it. It's called The Banker's Guide to Art. You should see it. It's available on YouTube. And what they say is, when you have a painting and you have a print, multiple prints, how does it work? Their view has been that when you have a lot of prints which go out into the public space, it creates and generates a collective public memory. Basically, advertising. Right? And so finally, when the painting comes for sale, you don't have to work that hard, because it's already entrenched into the minds of a lot of people. And once this feeder class of society can now afford it, whether you make vaccines or not, 167 crores.
another question here. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation, sir. My question was regarding the gender politics and gender roles that you discussed on. It was a very interesting take because I believe that we are judging Ravi Varma from the contemporary Western values of gender roles or gender politics or the gender debate in large.
Western?
Western framework or Western view, point of view at things. But Ravi Varma was truly Indic in nature. I don't think he was westernized in that sense. Did he pick up anything from the West, or was he influenced by the West? I don't think so. Should we be viewing him from the contemporary gender politics or gender debate that's going on in the world?
Yes, we
and
should.
make a
Oh, sorry.
judgment on his work?
Yes, we should. Yes, we should. I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you why, because with the transgender amendment which has taken place now, a lot has come up, especially in relation to identity, right? I don't want to talk about what the Ganesh V Shivaswamy Foundation is going to do about it. We are coming to that in a bit. You'll see it on Instagram. So let's not talk about that now. But a lot of work has been, I would like to say, destroyed. And where did it begin? Now, you're saying, let me not say Ravi Varma. Let us say Ravi Varma, because here you have an example with Damayanti, where notional gender stereotypes was not followed. Let us now go to Ravi Varma Press, which printed a chromolithograph titled Bahucharaji. Who is Bahuchara? She's a Shakti Peeth and the patron deity of the transgender community. That's how far back it goes. There have been multiple reports and a lot of work which has been done which says that the process of emasculation takes place in front of her. That's how far back we have not judged. That's how far back we've not judged. Fast forward to now, recently, you have a Supreme Court judgment which validates it till now. And then you have the Transgender Protection Act, which allowed for self-perception. And then you have 377. That's another thing. Then fast forward to 2025, January, where suddenly in this process of sensitizing, accepting, embracing, not judging, the trump card is thrown in. The executive order of January 2025 comes in, which abolishes DEI. It's his first executive order. He shifts it back to the binary. All right. For India, it's an old thing of accepting. Suddenly the world goes binary. The world doesn't go binary. America goes binary. Out of DEAI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, DEI is removed. Then, for some strange reason, inexplicable reason, India starts getting excited about it. For what? There's an Arushi Mishra's report. You should read it. It's a very, very interesting, very well-researched report in relation to the LGBTQ community. Right? And Arushi Mishra actually tells you this is the percentage of the population which is declared to be, because a whole bunch of them, one, don't know, or two, even if they don't know, they don't talk about it, because that's how bad acceptance is. The central government about 2 months ago files an affidavit into the Supreme Court by saying no blood donation from the LGBTQ community. And then they are asked, how do you know that they are LGBT? Because you can't do any blood test to show that a boy is straight, right? There's no blood test on earth. It's only self-perception. Then the the Transgender Amendment Act comes in and says no self-perception. Where are we going? We are getting into very difficult times in relation to the absence of judgment. I think everything's going to be judged. It's a very difficult turn of events, and I would like to take it back to Trump. Absolutely, it is an aberration. Absolutely, it is. But who is to talk about it? All the three, lower house, upper house, and president approve it in the span of 5 weeks. Which other legislation has happened like that? Which other why the rush when Middle East has a war? This that I don't want to. There's a lot which is going on. Yes.
Ganesh, should we take it as a last question?
As you wish. I'm happy to. We're getting interesting questions. I don't know what. Anyway, yes, please.
Hello, Ganesh. It was a very insightful
I
session.
don't know who's asking me.
It's here. It's here. Very in the end.
Oh, there. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a very good session. Thank you. My question is an added question to one of the question that asked here. So I want to know about the process of how we used to approach the people for modeling as inspiration for the art. It's really interesting that if you talk about the Lakshmi idol, the person who has done is a Devdasi. So how did that approach, or in general, how did he approach people to model for the inspiration?
No records. One would assume that they were part of a community of or a social community or something like that. But did he accept insofar as the Jew where he actually for Rajibai Mulgaonkar? No. For that matter, there are so many other models like Gauri and all of that. We don't even know how. We know that Gauri and Ravi Varma met at the Baroda Palace. But apart from that, did he actually request her pose this way? No documents. We'll have to assume that it was part of a larger conversation.
I'd like to ask about like there was a mention of incremental innovation versus originality, and in the lens of you, the process that you describe, like photograph, all the paintings are realistic paintings, and in order to create realistic paintings, an artist has to observe either in reality in photographs how the drapery falls when the knee is bent. So all of these processes are ordinary. So I am not a full-time artist, but I do art. So all of these processes are, or when I see the painting, I know some sort of like this process has to happen in the back end or in the studio, as you described. So what do you think, or what is, according to you, original or an incremental, or not an incremental, but a good original innovation? What do you think?
It's difficult to answer it generically, but if you were to look at particular instances, you will have to look at reference material 1, reference material 2, reference, and then look at the evolution for you to say this is what happened. So it can't be done in a very generic sense, but the evolution of the image, whether it is incremental or radical, I think each one of them works in a different way, and it depends on which image you're actually talking about. Yes.
Thank you for inviting us. I have several questions, but I'll ask only one this time. Regarding Indrajit victory,
Yes.
I'm very curious about that, especially at that painting, because I want to know why was it given so much of importance as Indrajit victory was painted, because in Ramayana there are several scenes where Rama, Sita, the main characters with Anjanya and several others. But why is that Indrajit was given importance? This struck me when I framed it. It was my father's collection, which was not framed. When I framed it, my hubby asked, "Why Indrajit?" So I just want to ask you the right. I'm not judging. I just want to know.
The thing is that when the original painting was painted for the Maharaja of Mysore, the archives, the divisional archives, only has a list by saying these are the paintings which I intend painting for this place and then the Darbar Hall, etc. And they're rather descriptive in nature, where Ravi Varma says, "This is what I wish to paint." Who actually chose those subjects? We don't know. The archive at least doesn't mention it. Did it go back and forth in relation to why not this, why not that, why not something else? No records of it at all. This question in relation to whether the painting was an appropriate painting, special painting, all of that has come up later on, because when the paintings were displayed on the sedge of the Mysore Palace, the painting was removed. Though that series of paintings were removed, only one of them remains. One of the Ravivarmas remain, and were all replaced by the works of an artist called Shilpi Siddhalinga Swami, K.S. Siddhalinga Swami, who interestingly was one of the first people, was one of the people who initially drew the designs for Vidhan Soda. That person. He had it removed. Presumably because they were not appropriate to a Maharaja sitting there. You would rather have Chamundi or Gayatri or Lakshmi or Saraswati. So one would imagine that the themes were by that time considered a bit inappropriate. So therefore, who originally asked for it? The archives don't have it.
So should we call it today, Ganesh? So on behalf of National Gallery of Modern Art Bengaluru and Ministry of Culture, and from all of you here, I thank Ganesh. That was a very exciting and overwhelming talk. And so, I mean, thank you for taking us through that expedition and exploring that, the very important box, without which I don't think we would have been here. On this occasion, I would request Uma Madam to kindly come and, thank Mr. Ganesh with a small souvenir from our art shop. Before we close, an announcement. The exhibition Eye to Eye, The Shades of Humanity, will conclude tomorrow. If you have not gone through it, please catch up the exhibition. And please follow us on the social media handles for further events and exhibitions. Thank you. Have a good night.